Tonight we are talking all about microplastics. These are tiny particles of plastic that research has shown show up in some crazy places in the body. So it brings about a lot of questions of like, how the heck did they get there? Can we get rid of them? How do we reduce our exposure to these microplastics? So we are going to dive into that tonight and answer all of your questions about microplastics. My name's Dr. Katie Dinello, along here with Dr. Jennifer Stagg. We are the Natural Doctors. Welcome to our show. So tonight, all about microplastics. This is a really big topic that is getting so much media attention over the last couple years, especially the last couple of months. Dr. Jen, can you kick us off? What is a microplastic? This is such a science thing.
Right, I know. Yeah, so micro means little, right? Yeah. So there are actual measurements for how small these particles are. So when we look at microplastics, we're talking about a micrometer to a few millimeters. You know, conceptually, we can think about this in terms of a piece of hair, right? Is how we think about it. And so a piece of hair, just one strand, is 70 micrometers wide. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then beyond so we said microplastics can be a micrometer, and a hair is like 70 micrometers, right? Then we have this other category called nanoparticles, nanoplastics. Now, these particles even smaller. Yep. And this is where these particles are actually under a micrometer. And those, you know, we'll get into it, but those might be actually even worse. We're not hearing a lot about those. And the reason is they're so tiny. The detection methods to really understand and detect where this could be in the body are just, you know, we don't have really good methods yet for that.
Right. Yeah. So these are really small.
Yes.
Like so small. It's almost hard to even conceptualize how small these particles are.
Yeah, like because if you're shaking up your water bottle or something, you're not going to see. So people, that's the big thing. When people think microplastics, they're thinking cutting boards and water bottles, right?
Exactly.
And you can't see, you're not going to see those particles. I mean, if it was big, so you can see a chunk of your cutting board, right? Because we were saying like 5 millimeters, and millimeters you can detect, right? You can actually see a millimeter, because then we're talking about like a little tiny bit like that. So those are chunks of plastic, but they're not getting absorbed like chunks like that.
No. Yeah, it's those smaller parts that break off of that.
Yeah.
So, okay, yeah, and like you said, I think it's worth emphasizing here that it's really hard to understand this research or to even do research on these things, A, because they're so small, and then B, right, we don't have the most accurate numbers around these. Like, yes, we can kind of estimate where these particles are coming from, how many might be in the body, right? There are estimates, but it is really, really challenging. So, you know, it's definitely an area of science that is continuing to evolve. And I imagine over the next 5-10 years, we're going to have so much more information about these.
Yes, exactly, of course. So, I mean, you're spot on there, because when we're looking at microplastics and we're thinking about, well, how much are we all getting, right? And you hear people talking about like, oh, I'm eating a credit card every week of plastic, or even, you know, maybe a little bit longer than that. But some you know, things, headlines are like a plastic credit card a week. Mm-hmm. And that's not accurate in terms of what we know about microplastics, because the microplastic exposures, I pulled some data, and it looks like from modeling, so this can be, you know, like big
range.
Yeah. And that could be somewhere up to 50,000 particles a year coming from food and beverages. And then we're going to talk about where all these are coming from. But if we just stay in that food and beverage category, we're talking about probably 50,000 of those particles. But these are microplastics, remember? The estimates on nanoplastics, okay, like that's probably could be a bigger issue. We just don't even know.
Right.
Can't really talk about that because the science isn't there. But maybe we talk about sources, like where these particles are coming from.
Right, exactly. So we, wanted to do this episode because it's a big topic and it's something that we really don't know a huge amount about, right? Like we are always telling our patients, like we want to minimize the amount of plastic we use as much as possible. But in doing research for this episode, I even learned so much of where these are coming from. So for example, the wind, literally the wind, the air we breathe contains microplastics.
Right. So that whole, they inhale it.
Yes.
So when I said the statistic that I pulled of 50,000 from food and beverages, we add on inhalation, and it's basically going to double that or more, upwards of 120,000 particles a year. And these are, again, micro, not nano. So it's like in your home, you're breathing it in. So now we got to talk about why is it in the air outside?
Yes.
Why is it in the air in our home?
Exactly. So outside, we're getting a lot of it. I mean, of course, these environmental exposures, but tires.
Yes.
So the wear and tear from tires, because again, it's not like you have a chunk of a tire coming off, right? It's like the abrasion of a tire over and over and over again on the road. That's very, very small, right? Coming off. And imagine for every single car, every single tire, right? So that's a lot. And that's getting in the air. We're outside. We breathe that in. If you're stuck in traffic on highways, you're breathing that in.
Or if you live in a city, right? So if you're in
Yep.
an urban environment, you're on you're in New York and you're walking around, there's cars everywhere, you're going to have more exposure in that way, right?
Exactly. And then if we think about our homes, those nano and microplastics are coming off of any type of fabric. So carpet, furniture, right? These are really big sources, and it will be in the air, but then it can even, settle in the dust. So we'll talk about cleaning and, how that can reduce exposures.
And then we have this massive category that a lot of people, sometimes I hear people talk about it, but clothing, right? So the textiles, which you were talking about, rugs and furniture, but huge is plastic clothing. Let's just call it what it is.
Yes,
it's and I wear it. We all wear it, right? A fleece. And so depending on the type of plastic you're wearing, so if you're wearing a really tightly woven polyester, so leggings that are really tightly woven, you'll have some shedding, and over time it sheds. But if you're wearing a fuzzy fleece, and I was doing this and when I was really looking into this, sitting in my North Face fleece and going okay, that's nice. Okay. Me that's too. A big shedder. Or think of pajamas that have that sort of brushed texture on it that is not a natural fiber. So this is where we're going to get those microplastics. So
And part of it has to do with the length of these fibers. If they're shorter, there's kind of more area for exposure of these particles to kind of come off of them. So that's a huge piece of it too. It's the fabric and then how it's woven together, actually. So there's a lot involved in the textile.
Or also acrylic sweaters. So if you have, again, a fuzzy sort of sweater and it has acrylic in it, then that's shedding microplastics too. And when you first get that clothing, it will have more shedding. And then the first couple of washes, it's coming out a lot more. So washing is a big sort of kick up of the microplastics. And then even in the lint, I started thinking what about when I'm cleaning that lint catcher in the dryer, right? And it's dusty and it comes out. Think of how much microscopic stuff. And I'm thinking, maybe I need to do that outside, maybe, right?
That's a good idea. Do it near your air filter. And I'm the type of person, I wear a lot of sweatpants, and scrubs in my life. And I definitely don't wash my clothes when I get them. In fact, I try to wear many times as
Well,
I
so
can
then
before.
but the strategy is to not wash them as often. That actually can reduce your microplastic
Yep.
exposure.
Exactly.
Right? But
Exactly.
that first
That
time
first
you
time you
should
should.
wash it, and then
Correct.
those first couple of washes, more of it will come out,
Yeah.
and then try to kind of hold it a bit longer. Right?
Exactly. And while we're on the topic of clothes, athleisure is a big category of clothing here,
Yes.
right? And so you really want to try, and this is so hard, but you want to try to minimize washing that.
Yes.
Even though we're working out in that stuff,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So it's tricky. It's tricky.
It is. And yeah, I mean, you can, some of the reduction, and a lot of the science actually comes from the textile industry. Like they actually look at all of this in detail. So this is where we're getting this information. And that is just like you talked about with tires, that sort of like abrasive, mechanical. So if you're washing it really hard, you're washing it in hot water versus cold water. So you should do like a gentler cycle, colder water, and you're going to have less shedding of the microplastics.
Yep.
And that's better for your clothes anyway, which is why they even look at this in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. And then you want to try not to put things in the dryer too, as much as you can. That's the other piece. So.
Yeah, and like ideally, I mean, you can hang it inside, but then you could getting some inhalant, but it's not heated. But if you old school you had a clothesline outside,
that's what we need. Oh
so
my
go back
gosh,
to clotheslines.
truly.
I think there's ordinances where you're not allowed to have clotheslines in probably in our town.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No chickens or clothesline.
I believe it. So the inhalation piece is one part of it. And then we need to think about that we are ingesting these particles as well. And so, of course, that's coming from food, water, right? Plastic sources, things like that.
Yeah.
And so this is probably the category that I think about most when I think about, ingesting microplastics. I think similar for a lot of other people.
Yes.
Of course, initially we're all going to be thinking plastic water bottles, right? That's a huge exposure.
So we really should be encouraging to drink from glass, stainless steel, right? That it can really help your exposure. But I guess now we should sort of talk about that the body does have mechanisms to sort of catch that stuff.
Yes.
Right?
Definitely.
So it doesn't mean we're getting all this exposure. So those statistics that I spit out of 50,000 particles a year, 120,000 particles a year, the science says that it's probably under 1% of those particles that could potentially get through barriers, meaning lung barrier. So we have this mucociliary barrier in the lung that can catch things, and then in the gut, and we've talked about this plenty here, about having a good gut barrier, leaky gut, that whole issue. But this is where people potentially could have more risk also. If they have leaky gut, they could have more of the particles, these microplastics actually entering the bloodstream, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So it definitely, highlights the fact that we want to have a healthy gut, right? And we really want to do everything we can to make sure we are having great bowel movements, right? Regular elimination so that we can get rid of these things from our body.
Yeah.
And, we can't overemphasize enough that so many of our episodes, it comes down to doing the basics and really supporting your body's natural abilities, right? I think we need all these fancy supplements and all these fancy techniques when in reality our bodies are designed to do these things, right? To eliminate, to get rid of these things. And so that's really what we want to be supporting. And that's one of the core principles of naturopathic medicine.
Absolutely. It's so important to recognize that, you're ingesting these particles, but most of them, the vast majority, 99% plus of them, we think are going out in the stool is what they say. Now, again, nanoparticles, nanoplastics, we can't really get into that in terms of details of what's actually going on there. Could those be cleared potentially? That's another thing. If you know, a microplastic, once it gets into circulation, it cannot, so if it crosses through the lung or it crosses through the gut barrier and it gets into circulation, it's too big to get out through the kidneys. So your blood can't filter it out like it filters other things and get out. But the nanoparticles theoretically could be filtered through the kidney. So still, like, the body has these other mechanisms to get it out. And then even once it gets in, it could come out like through through your liver, basically, right? There's kind of like, and then it gets out through the bile and dumps back into the gut, and out it goes again. So there's some sort of backup plans our intelligently designed bodies have.
Right, exactly.
However, we have found these things in places in the body, you know, like in circulation. So obviously that's what we're talking about. Okay, you can find these particles through looking at it. It's in the blood system. But the biggest study that came out was about the microplastics in the carotid arteries in the neck, right? Where they were, you know, doing a procedure on people who had plaque in their arteries and found that people who have more microplastic or detectable microplastic had worse outcomes. So this is considered an association, not causative. There could be other reasons why that's going on. Do they have a leaky gut? You know, like we don't know all the reasons, but it definitely gives us concern about accumulating microplastic getting into plaque, right? And having a worse outcome. That came out in 2024. It was kind of rocked the world, I feel like.
Yeah, I know. When we found that study, it was definitely like, ooh, wow, this is a little bit more significant than we thought. Of, you know, it's one thing to think about, okay, they're getting into our circulation, maybe they're slightly bypassing the gut, but then to actually end up in our plaque. And then to take it a step further and say, okay, we did have associations of, you know, these patients had worse cardiovascular outcomes when they had more, you know, microplastics in the plaque. So, you know, we're not about fear mongering on this show, but that is definitely like a pause for concern. And it makes me want to say, okay, what can I do on a day-to-day, week, monthly, yearly basis to make sure I have healthy lungs, healthy gut, healthy liver, and how to reduce my exposures, right? So we don't need to be fearful, but, you know, we pay attention.
Yeah, exactly. And it does then, I mean, make the case for, if you start thinking mechanistically about why someone could potentially be accumulating more plastic. You wonder, is this exposure? Is it, again, like, is it a leaky gut? Do they have some, you know, chronic lung disease as well that could be associated with those patients? We don't know. I think they need to really kind of like dive deeper and do a lot more research with that, which I'm sure hopefully people are really looking into. It's definitely an active area of research. I guess the specifics of determining what exactly is causative, that takes a lot more, you know, a lot more study and work for sure.
So maybe we, you know, kind of based on this study, based on our knowledge as doctors, we take a minute and think about, okay, what are some patient profiles that might lead us to tell a patient like, hey, I think that we should really talk about this, about reducing your exposure and, you know, about working on whatever health concerns you have, because maybe they're related to building up of microplastics. So like you said, you know, somebody with a chronic lung condition, right? If you're a smoker, right? That's, so what, you know, when it comes to the lungs, because we definitely haven't talked about the lungs on our show that much. Our lungs produce mucus, and that mucus is what traps particles and pathogens, and we clear it out, right? When we have like a productive cough and we're coughing up mucus, it's not a bad thing. It's again, our body's protective mechanism. And so there's a couple other things there that help us do that. And that's normal, and we want that to be really healthy, right? But if you smoke, that's really going to disrupt that, you know, natural ability of our lungs. Again, like if you have some type of chronic lung disease like COPD, asthma, something like that, you really want to keep that well controlled, because that's going to help as well. And then, you know, reducing other airborne environmental exposures is really important. So if this comes up a lot, if we've had a patient who is a firefighter, right? They have, you know, potential smoke inhalation, you know,
or they're like burning fire, like in a fireplace or using a wood stove, we know that those particles can contribute, that they're inhaled in the environment, right?
Guilty of that a little bit with all my summer camping.
But if you, meaning like if you had COPD, you might like scale back on that and not do that so much, right?
So and then the gut piece, right? Anybody who isn't eliminating, every day, having really well-formed bowel movements, dysbiosis, infections in the gut. If you have a lot of, like, if you've had cases of food poisoning, right? These are all really important key concepts here as well.
And it does come back into the microbiome again, because just like in the lungs, we're talking about mucus there's actually a mucus layer in the gut. And that's really key part of kind of like a trapping mechanism, and certain strains of bacteria like Akkermansia are really important in that layer. And so the types of dietary strategies that you would work on to really enhance the health of that layer are things like really rich polyphenol diets. So green tea and olive oil and, pomegranate, all these like great polyphenols. So, you wouldn't think necessarily right away, okay, microplastics, what's my strategy here? Of course, we joke about this. Okay, it goes back to the gut again, right?
It does.
And then it's like the gut lung. We're saying like everything is now the new axis, the gut lung axis.
Yeah, gut kidney, gut liver.
We're like, and it all goes back to the gut.
It does. Yeah, it's central. Okay, so what are some other practical tips that we can give people to reduce exposures? We've talked about really reducing plastic water bottles, plastic containers. And
the heating in the microwave.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, please stop. Everybody. Yes. And then this is my other pet peeve, is like, you get the glass container, but the lids are always plastic, right?
Yes, right.
So then you keep the lid on when you're microwaving, and it's like, no, please don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
And then the cutting boards is a huge piece. Like that's a huge piece of the puzzle too. And then I know, when you go to the grocery store and everything is in plastic, right?
Yes.
So like a lot of things are unavoidable, but really like that's why we wash our fruits and veggies, because they come in plastic containers, right? We wash them. Hopefully we're eliminating some of those microplastics when we do that.
Right. Yep. And then this goes into more of those strategies of maybe growing some of your own food, eating locally, getting farmers markets, and not using plastic bags, and using, canvas bags that are not containing microplastics.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it takes a little bit of effort and intention, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then from the inhalation perspective, we talked about the textiles, really trying to clean your homes and trying to vacuum up that dust, right? And because that comes up a lot in the research.
And if you just wear a general mask, so it's kind of, the filtering ability of general masks, like for these nanoparticles, like nanoparticles are going through a mask.
Yeah, exactly. Whoops.
But I mean, if it's embedded into a dust particle, at least it could catch a little bit of it.
Some of it.
Right?
Yep. And then HEPA filters, right? So having good filters in your home. I definitely, these can be a little bit pricey, so it's a little bit tricky, but I definitely recommend that.
And it is important. And then, if you're dealing with more challenges related to environmental inhalation, exactly, like using some of these really powerful devices can be key. I remember when my son was living in an off-campus house last year, I bought him a super duper air filter for his room, and it runs, you set it up and it starts running until it filters everything out of the bedroom. And he said, it took a few hours, and then it really, when he walked out into the main living space versus in his room, you literally could detect a difference in the air. Like the air was like lighter. Sure. He just described it as more dense and kind of damp. I'm sure there's mold, like all sorts of stuff in this nasty house. But this is the key, right?
Yeah,
that you might not be able to see it,
right,
but you're inhaling this stuff.
Yep, it's so true. It's so true. Yeah. And then, like we said with clothes, cold, gentle cycles, trying not to dry them outside if we can. Yeah.
And then really just starting to really maybe do more intentional shopping when you're thinking
Yes.
about what to buy. And I know I've really been working on this the last year or two, where I'm really looking at labels and going like, is this wool? You know, is it a natural fiber?
Yes.
Is it a wool blend? You know, like I'm trying to really limit the amount that I'm getting, trying to get more cotton.
Yes.
These are like a great strategies as well, cost effective, but also good for the environment of consignment shopping, right?
Yes,
So you're going to get some used clothes that's had a bunch of washes and maybe has a little, you know, if you're buying something that is not a natural fiber, but again, really trying to work on wearing more cotton and linen, things like that.
Yep.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. I think we did it.
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
I guess to kind of end off with a couple of kind of misconceptions that are out there.
Definitely.
So I think we talked about the credit card.
Yes. Yeah. That is not
true. Credit card worth of
true.
plastic every week is not true. And then just like the concept that microplastics are accumulating endlessly in the body.
Right.
And that's not true, because it's, you know, all the evidence suggests that these particles are being trapped and cleared through the stool or the airway mucus. And then finally, if you're seeing a detox protocol for microplastics out there, there's nothing bring it to our attention. I would love to see it, but we milled through all the science and then we can't find anything that shows any sort of protocol to clear microplastics once they have been detected in your system.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. Any protocol that exists is going to be theoretical, right?
Yes.
And not evidence-based or science-based. And again, that doesn't mean it's not working per se, but you know, you want to be cautious about this because the evidence, it's really not there. And this is still newer science. Like we still have so much to learn about these things. So really the best things we can do are work on reducing exposures, have a healthy gut, have healthy lungs.
Which is good for you anyway, right?
Exactly.
And plus all this stuff has other chemicals too. I know we're focusing on microplastics, but we're also talking about like general chemical exposure also that's kind of planted in there with all this plastic as well.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of The Natural Doctors. Don't forget to subscribe to our show, comment, let us know what you want to hear in upcoming episodes.
I'm your host, Kurt Barwis. Today, I have a very special guest, Dr. Andrew Lin.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Veterans Corner. My name is Chuck Wooden.
Decision for ourselves for this week, if we want to be made well.
Hi, welcome to the crack of dawn. It's Dawn Lombardi. I'm starting the painting. It's going to be the clips with some water. Love it.
He took me on the sets of Lost in Space, Batman.
Everybody has a story. What's yours? Until next time.
Nick Augustino right here at the East Side Restaurant. We always have the complete full dinner menu. Knockwurst, bratwurst, sauerbraten, potato pancakes, red cabbage, rice pudding, cream pies, all the desserts that Germany had to offer. I always do something different. Yes, I do. I brought seafood to the beer garden at the East Side Restaurant. East Side Restaurant, your German destination restaurant in Connecticut. Tiki-taka, hoy, hoy, hoy!